Hi, and welcome to 6.6 Hormones and Homeostasis. This is the first 6.6 PowerPoint. There's a second one which will go over the reproduction and menstrual cycle. So don't panic if you think it's not here's
Here
the
it's
specification if you want it. Pause it and have a little look if you are interested. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to look at the control of blood glucose concentration. So there's a few hormones that you need to know about for this section. You should have come across some of these hormones before, well, these hormones before. On the next slide, there are some new hormones. So we need to know about glucagon and insulin. So when blood glucose is low, so for example, when if it's been a long time and since you've eaten or if you've been doing lots of exercise, glucagon is released from alpha cells in the pancreas. Now I always remember that glucagon is released from alpha cells because glucagon has an A in it. That might help you. The glucagon then causes glycogen to be broken down into glucose, and then the glucose is released into the blood, and this increases the blood glucose back to normal levels. So it's a homeostatic mechanism. We're returning blood glucose to normal. When blood glucose is high, so for example, after a meal, insulin is released from beta cells in the pancreas, and this causes glucose in the blood to be taken in and stored as glycogen in liver cells. And therefore that decreases the blood glucose concentrations back down to normal. So this is a homeostatic mechanism. We're trying to return blood glucose to normal, whether it be too low or too high. And this is all outlined in this diagram here. Okay, so you've probably heard of diabetes, and diabetes is characterized by high blood glucose levels. So the blood glucose levels stay high when you would expect them to have gone back down to normal. Symptoms include thirst, frequent urination, fatigue or feeling tired, and also craving sweet and sugary foods. You might also know that there's type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is where the insulin just isn't produced, and it's actually an autoimmune disease. It's generally diagnosed in childhood or early adulthood and has to be treated with insulin injections or special insulin pumps or devices. So now you can have an insulin pump fitted, which automatically pumps the insulin in when the blood glucose is too high. Type 2 diabetes occurs later on in adulthood, and what happens is the insulin is still released, however, the body can't respond to the insulin release, so therefore the blood sugar remains high. And then causes include a diet that's high in sugar or fat, obesity, and a lack of exercise. So type 2 diabetes is a result of lifestyle. And you need to be prepared to analyze data relating to diabetes. There's actually loads of data relating to diabetes. So that could come in data analysis questions. Okay, other hormones that you need to know about. So you probably haven't heard of these hormones. The first hormone is thyroxine. Now, thyroxine is released from the thyroid gland. That's quite easy to remember. And it regulates the metabolic rate and controls the body temperature. Now we've got along here where it's secreted, the target organ, and anything else you need to know about it. So it's obviously where it's secreted from is where it's released from in the body, and the target organ or cell is the organ or cell that it actually has an effect in. So obviously all cells need their metabolic rate regulated. So therefore the target cells for thyroxine is all cells. Also, when you're cold, thyroxine can be released to stimulate heat production and the body temperature rises. And how it does this is it causes the rate of respiration to increase. And obviously, when the rate of respiration increases, the heat made via the respiration, more heat is made via respiration. So therefore, it helps to warm you up. You can also be deficient in thyroxine, and these symptoms include fatigue, depression, weight gain, feeling cold, and constipation. The second hormone you need to know about, and there's quite a lot of exam questions around this, like just little multiple choice ones or 1-2 mark questions, is leptin. Now, the function of leptin is to inhibit appetite, so it helps you to feel full and sends the signals and allows you to stop eating. It's secreted by adipose cells, which are fat cells, And the target organ is the hypothalamus in the brain. So the fat cells release leptin, and the leptin moves to the hypothalamus in the brain to allow us to understand that we're feeling full. So when leptin is secreted, the appetite is inhibited. So if we're inhibiting appetite, it means that we're not going to want to eat more. And there were some studies done into using leptin as a treatment for obesity. So they used it in mice, and it looked like it was going to be useful in order to treat obesity. However, when they used it in humans, the trials were called off because there were side effects, and also people regained the weight after treatment. There was also a massive range in the amount of weight that people lost. So some people lost like 4 or 5 times the amount of other people. So it wasn't a particularly reliable treatment. It's one of those treatments that you couldn't then prescribe to lots of people because it may not have a particularly large effect. The last hormone is melatonin, and melatonin controls circadian rhythms. So the circadian rhythm is what allows us to feel tired at nighttime and feel awake in the daytime. Now, melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland, and the target cells are the suprachiasmatic nuclei in the brain. And they're the cells that help to set a daily rhythm with no external cues. So melatonin, the reason that newborn babies don't just automatically sleep at night and stay awake during the day is because the melatonin isn't actually released until they're about 3 months old. So they don't actually know that it's nighttime until they're about 3 months old. And then melatonin is released in the evening, so it promotes sleep. So obviously in newborn babies, when it isn't being released, they don't know that it's nighttime, so they should be sleeping. And some people can take melatonin tablets to alleviate jet lag. So if you're jet lagged and wide awake at night, if you take melatonin tablets, that might then help you sleep. So 3 extra hormones that we need to know about: functions, where it's secreted from, the target organ, and then some extra little information there as well. Okay. We also need to know about sex determination in males, and this links to the previous hormonal stuff because we're going to talk about testosterone a little bit later on. So we should know that the male sex chromosomes are XY, whilst the female chromosomes are XX. The gender is determined by whether an X sperm or a Y sperm fuse with the egg during fertilization. So all eggs have one X chromosome. If they're fertilized by an X sperm, then that would be a female embryo. If they're fertilized by a Y sperm, it would be a male embryo. Now, the Y chromosome carries a specific gene called the SRY gene, and the SRY gene codes for protein called the testes determining factor, or TDF. Now, the role of TDF is to stimulate the expression of the genes involved in the development of the testes. The testes later on will then secrete testosterone, and then they will cause the child to become male. They will, you can see that the testes develop around week 8 of pregnancy, and they secrete testosterone, and then the testosterone causes the development of the male genitalia within the womb. At puberty, the testosterone also causes the growth of the penis, pubic hair, body hair, and also the deepening of the voice. So all of those kind of secondary characteristics that appear during puberty. You also need to know the structure of the male reproductive system from a side view and a front view. Now, usually in previous study, you might have studied the female reproductive system, and we might be able to label that. You might not have studied the male reproductive system before. So there's a few things that you specifically need to know about. You need to know that the testes, which are here, or labeled as a testicle here, but testes, they produce the sperm, millions of sperm every day. The epididymis is this kind of little area above the testes that stores the sperm once they've been made. You've also got seminal vesicles. So you can see up here, this is the seminal vesicle, and you've got seminal vesicle on your front view there. The seminal vesicle produces an alkali fluid that mixes with the sperm to produce the semen. The prostate gland is here and also here. That has quite a similar job to the seminal vesicles. And then the urethra is this tube here, that goes all the way down the penis and here as well. Now, it might help if you think about the sperm being made in the testes and stored in the epididymis. Now, when the sperm are leaving the body, what happens is they move through this tube called the vas deferens. So the sperm are all moving through the tube, through the vas deferens. They then mix with the alkali fluid from the seminal vesicle to make the semen, and then that continues down through the urethra and out like that. So sperm are made, move through the vas deferens, they mix with the fluid to produce semen, and then move through the urethra and out of the penis. Female reproductive system, you might be a little bit more familiar with this. So you need to, we'll do this bit in a minute. You need to know that you've got 2 ovaries, one on each side. You've got the fallopian tubes here. So the fallopian tubes allow the follicles to move, or the eggs to move into the uterus. This is the uterus here. This is where an embryo and a fetus would develop. The endometrium is the lining of the uterus, and that's really important in the menstrual cycle in the second video that goes with 6.6. You've got the cervix, which is between the vagina and the uterus, an opening there. And then you've got the vagina down here. You also need to know the female reproductive system from the side view as well. So you need to know the ovary produces and stores eggs, also produces the hormones estrogen and progesterone. The uterus, an area for the fetus to grow. The cervix dilates during birth to allow the baby to exit. If you are an HL student, you'll learn more about that in chapter 11. Endometrium is the lining of the uterus, important later on for the menstrual cycle. And then the vagina is just the muscular tube, leads from the cervix to the external genitals. Okay, so how is sex determined in females? So previously we said that females have an XX chromosome, so it means that the egg was obviously X and an X sperm fertilized the egg. So therefore there's no SRY gene. The SRY gene is on the Y chromosome, not present in females. This then causes ovaries to develop, and because the ovaries secrete the female hormones estrogen and progesterone, this then causes the development of the female reproductive system, or the female reproductive organs. During puberty, the estrogen and progesterone cause the development of secondary sexual characteristics such as breast enlargement, growth of pubic hair, and growth of underarm hair. The estrogen and progesterone during puberty are also responsible for the onset of the menstrual cycle.